We want to go ahead and continue the conversation surrounding, our governments, but also our waterways. So let's bring in Trevor Layton. He's the communications manager for SEMCOG, which is the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. Trevor, great to have you with us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
For those that aren't familiar with SEMCOG, give us a little bit of background about the mission, because you guys tackle a lot of different issues.
Absolutely. So SEMCOG, as you said, the Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. So there's a couple different ways to think of us. One is as a regional planning organization. So when you think about all the freeways, major arterial roads, water systems, economic development, parks, all these sort of big things that span across our region that affect quality of life in Southeast Michigan. SEMCOG is a place where local officials can kind of come together and coordinate and collaborate, because what somebody does in Pontiac, whether it's, opening a new shop or improving the ability for people who walk and bike to get around downtown, that's going to affect the people in Waterford and the choices that they make in their day-to-day life. So SEMCOG is a place where currently we've got 175 community members spanning the 7-county region of SEMCOG. So we get together, and it's a bipartisan place where we can work on all sorts of issues.
It's so nice to hear someone say those words, working together, collaboration, bipartisan. So with that, especially coming out of this past year where I feel like our politics have been so divisive, does that really have an impact on your organization, or are the leaders coming together and it's kind of their safe place to really have real conversations to better our communities?
Well, we certainly exist in the real world, so the challenges that exist in the political environment will have some impact on all of us, including SEMCOG. The thing that we're, I think, continuously grateful for is that, to a large degree, the local elected officials and government administrators and other partners that participate in SEMCOG, they tend to be self-selecting. These are people who want to collaborate. These are people who want to reach across the aisle. These are leaders, right? These are folks who have an experience and understanding of the positives that come forth when we work together.
That is so true. I just think about so many projects that have kind of failed, especially the one over there at Telegraph and Square Lake. That's been years in the making and such a nightmare, as it is still continuing on, and really kind of started with some of the communities not always coming together. But with that, I will say this is Great Lakes and Freshwater Week. Tell us more about that.
I would love to. So one of the things that's true of people in Southeast Michigan and throughout the state is that a big part of our identity, I think, is how we connect to the Great Lakes and to the abundant freshwater resources that we have access to in this region. We are extremely fortunate to live at the heart of the world's greatest freshwater resource, surface freshwater resource. So no place on the planet is there better access to do all the wonderful things that we can do on the Great Lakes, as well as our inland lakes, rivers, and streams. So what Great Lakes and Freshwater Week is an opportunity for us to reflect on that good fortune, and also enjoy the resource that we have, and then think about what impact we can have as stewards to make the water resources that exist today continue to be wonderful places, maybe improve them, not just for ourselves, but for generations to come.
And with that, Trevor, if I can ask, because I do feel like maybe a positive to come out of the pandemic, we are being so much more aware about our environment and Mother Nature around us. And for so many of us here in our area, of course, that does include our lakes and our waterways. So do you feel, or have you seen the general public become more aware and more interested in protecting our waterways?
It's everything coming out of the pandemic. We're still kind of getting our feet under us and saying, what does it mean? How are things changing? What's staying the same? What do we want to double down on? And what do we want to move on from? So what I'll tell you in my experience working on this initiative, which has been really exciting, I've had the opportunity to talk with a lot of leaders in the realm of water quality throughout our region, as part of our One Water initiative leading up to Great Lakes and Freshwater Week. And one thing that they're all really consistent about is the connection between having a personal connection to a place or to a water body for recreation, and then how that will just naturally shift into a mindset of stewardship. So, taking myself as an example, if I spend time recreating with my family along the Rouge River, for instance, which is the water body that I live closest to, if I'm taking my kids for hikes along the Rouge River, if I notice that there is garbage at the portion of the river that we're enjoying, I'm going to be a lot more likely to care when I see somebody say, there's an opportunity to volunteer and get involved and work on a river cleanup. So yeah, the data do show that, in the past 16 months or so, people are using our parks and recreation resources a lot more, which of course there's a huge overlap between those and our water resources. So the more people that are getting out and enjoying the resource, absolutely, the more of a connection we hope to see when it comes to stewardship.
So when you're sitting in your position and you guys are talking about some of these initiatives and projects that you're undertaking, how do you take that from the conversation in a room to actually putting it and implementing it and trying to engage the public?
Well, I think there's a really good point that you touched on there, which is that especially for a planning organization like SEMCOG, we are looking at things from a 10,000-foot view all the time, right? We're looking not only on a really broad scale, but we're also looking along a pretty significant timeline. But not everyone is going to be thinking that way. Not everyone is a planner. Not everyone is an engineer. And so for me, I'm not either of those things. So for me, as I described, the connection takes place when we have people getting out and engaging with the resource. So, most of us at some point in our lives have been to a beach and gone swimming. We may have even been to a beach to swim in this region. And so when we talk about things like water quality and a harmful algal bloom, well, an algal bloom, might not sound great when you're listening to it on the news, but if you go to the beach and it's closed because all this stuff's washing up on shore, and you start to think, why does this keep happening? And then you understand that there are actions that all of us can take to prevent them from happening. That's where I think where we connect the wonderful work that's happening at the government level from our local officials and all the work that they're doing to protect the resource and improve it, as well as what we can do as citizens and folks who live here to see that, well, we have a part in it too. It's our resource. So we can't necessarily lay down miles of drinking water pipe, but we can go out and make sure that we recreate responsibly.
We're talking with Trevor Layton here on the MegaCast. He's the communications manager for SEMCOG, Southeast Michigan Council of Governments. Trevor, what other projects do you and your team members have going on right now?
Sure. So one of the really exciting things that we're working on at SEMCOG, and it's related to something that you just mentioned, which is that we're all still kind of going through, I think, a bit of a seismic shift in what life looks like and what we're all experiencing due to the pandemic. And so, as I mentioned, SEMCOG works on a variety of issues. I mentioned transportation, I mentioned parks and recreation. There's economic development, which involves things like, okay, so where are people setting up their offices? How are people working from home? Healthcare is obviously a huge issue, and that was before the pandemic even started. Obviously, we're aware of the healthcare challenges of the last year, but before that even happened, we knew that Southeast Michigan, like a lot of places in the country, is getting older. Our population is aging. The baby boomers are becoming there's this huge hump of our population curve that just is continuing to get older, which means that our needs in terms of quality of life and healthcare are really changing. Education and workforce is also a huge deal. So there were a number of trends that were in place before the pandemic, and then those have either been accelerated or altered in some way during the pandemic. So what we're trying to do now is look at the data and talk to the experts, talk to the folks who are on the ground and understand, okay, what we thought we knew about what was changing in the realm of water infrastructure or broadband a year ago, what parts of that are still true? What parts of that we thought we maybe had 5 to 10 years to really tackle have become more urgent? And then what have we learned through one thing that's really exciting about what's happened in the last year is a lot of local officials have just through necessity been forced to say, okay, we have a new problem, no one saw it coming, and there's no guidebook. I've got to come up with the solution. So by looking at the data, by talking to the experts, we're able to say, okay, what needs to change? What have we learned from the pandemic, and how can we get at that? And so what this initiative is, where we're looking at the new future of Southeast Michigan, we're going back to that data, and then we're hosting a series of community conversations with government officials and partners to look at these different issues and say, what's the same, what's changed, what have we learned, what do we need to do going forward?
So with that, Trevor, because I think it could be a fascinating time to be in the work that you all are doing, because we know sometimes our government doesn't move as quickly as some people feel like it should. Do you feel like because of the pandemic, everyone has had to think differently? Everyone has had to think outside of the box. And some of that will carry over into the future because maybe we're not going to go back to the old ways.
I think that's a great point. So not only are we going to be thinking differently about the way we do things, but I think that one of the challenges that local government officials have faced for a long time, particularly in Michigan, is it may look, in some instances as though folks are reluctant to change or to do things differently. But the reality for almost every local government in Southeast Michigan is that they have faced severe funding challenges. And when you don't have access to resources that enable you to evaluate what you're doing and make improvements, it can appear as though folks are apathetic or something, which is, in my experience, not the case. Local officials, in my experience, are hardworking and conscientious, and they're open to creative solutions. Now, one of the things that's also happened in the last year is we've had and we are continuing to have, that's going to be rolling out in the next several months and years, an influx of funding from the federal level, the likes of which we haven't seen in quite some time. So when you talk about the American Rescue Plan, the infrastructure funding talks that are going on at the federal level right now, those are creating different kinds of opportunities for local governments and state governments to make investments. And what's really important about having a sound planning process is that sometimes we don't know where the solution is going to come from, but we still have to be ready for it when the opportunity presents itself. So, when you have big influxes of funds for something like the American Rescue Plan, it's why a place like SEMCOG is really important, because we have a lot of communities that are experiencing similar challenges. They're all going to get some cut of federal funding, but there are also projects that cross municipal boundaries, that cross county boundaries, that may be throughout the state or even into other states. So it's figuring out how we get coordinated around how to invest these dollars in the way that's going to make the biggest impact now, which goes back to what you say. Okay, what we thought the biggest priority was 18 months ago, is that still true? Do we know if you had told a community you're going to get an influx of $5 million 18 months ago, what do you want to do with it? That answer might be different now than it was 18 months ago. And so it's making sure that we're taking a balance of the legacy information and the lessons that we've learned over time with all this new data that we've experienced in the form of all of our unique experiences during the pandemic.
Where do you collect your data from?
It comes from a range of resources depending on the topic. So when it comes to demographic and population information, we're taking that directly from the United States Census and American Community Survey, which is why promoting the census was a really challenging but important task that we took on last year with a lot of other partners throughout the state. Because when we understand how many people are living and working in different parts of our region, we understand a little bit better the need for resources. When it comes to transportation, we work with partners like Michigan Department of Transportation, MDOT, as well as local road agencies to actually go out and collect data on the condition of our roads and bridges, which actually means you have people that are trained to look at a road and rate it on a scale of 1 to 10 and say the quality of this road, it's good, it's fair, or it's poor. And so we're actually collecting that data on a rolling basis to understand these things. As more of these new topics emerge, we're having to look to different data resources. So when it comes to broadband, which is a really quickly emerging topic, we knew it was important before the pandemic, but once you told a huge amount of people. Well, now you're going to school at home or you're working from home. Broadband challenges that may have seemed like I said before, maybe a 5-year challenge, they suddenly became a 5-day challenge because we got to be ready to go to school on Monday. So looking to the FCC and then figuring out where some of the gaps in the data are, where can we look to find more data resources to help tell the story that we need to get these solutions going. So it's really a variety of sources.
Trevor Layton with us here on the MegaCast, Communications Manager for SEMCOG. And with that, Trevor, where can people find out more information? Because I know SEMCOG is always working on so many projects that really have big impact and influence on our communities as a whole.
100%. So anytime, come to semcog.org is our website, www.semcog.org. You can see what we're up to there. As we discussed before, there's an exciting initiative we're working with partners across the region on, including a couple of really key partners in Oakland County, including Jim Nash, the Water Resources Commissioner. He's participating in this One Water and Great Lakes and Freshwater Week campaign. You can see a special video we made with him on mi1water.org. A whole bunch of information about the One Water and Great Lakes and Freshwater Week initiative there, filled with wonderful tips of how we can all be good stewards. So understanding, not only the address of where you live, what's your watershed address, what's the impact of what you put down your drain, why does it matter that you keep storm clippings clear of your storm drain? All this information is available there at mi1water.org. And I'd really encourage folks to check that out.
Well, we so appreciate your time today. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks so much.